Welcome, welcome to the Boba Joe Show. What do you know, Boba Joe?
What's no, Boba Joe? How's it going, everybody? I hope we're all ready to spill some first blood.
I hope so. I hope you're ready. I'll give you a war you won't believe.
Give you war you won't believe. Nice t-shirt, Johnny. Rocking the
I've
cool
got two
Rambo
different
t-shirt.
Rambo shirts, courtesy of my missus. She gifted it to me about a year apart. This one and another one where it's more like a full image on the black and that, but they're both awesome. So like, anytime I wear them, I'm like, yeah, I'm going to war.
So we are talking about first blood today. I gotta just hit
Yeah.
you straight away with a question. Was this movie actually called First Blood Where You Lived, or was it just called Rambo?
As far as I know, it was called First Blood. Please, people out in the audience, I'm chucking an image on the screen. I know you're listening on audio, but don't confuse it with this other one here. There's knockoff Costanza 3 Serenity Now. Don't confuse it with that movie. It's worth watching. Don't confuse it with that one. And please, please do not confuse it with, we might talk about this one another time. Rambo First Blood Part 2. Happy Knife, Happy Life. We might talk about that one another time. But today was all about First Blood, which was called First Blood based on the whatever novel with differences. Retroactively, it was named Rambo in box sets, re-releases. Angry Nerd did a really good video actually about it. He's talking about like, what the fuck's up with all these stupid names and shit. It's like Halloween. It's like when they start retroactively renaming stuff on Friday the 13th, when there's all these sequels, sometimes it fucks up the earlier films. So we're definitely talking about First Blood, the first Rambo film, which was not called Rambo, but the character is John Rambo.
And for me, like, just because of growing up, and it was always just like Rambo 1, Rambo 2, and Rambo 3
Yeah.
was how I
Well,
kind of.
do you remember your first ever Rambo experience? I remember mine because it was one night I was getting a haircut, which might sound strange. What's it got to do with Rambo? Other than the part where they try to clean him up, obviously, in the opening act. No, I was getting a haircut with my dad because we used to go to, he had a workmate whose missus was like a hairdresser, but she stopped doing like salon hairdressing, basically did a home business doing like mates cuts for mates and workmates and all that. So once a month we used to go over there and get a haircut, like me and then him. And in between, he would probably sip on a bit of a drink or they're watching TV or whatever, shoot the shit. But in the background, the TV would be on, and no one's really watching it, but it's just on. And as I was walking around from the lounge into the kitchen to get my haircut, there was a bit of Rambo, and he was like snapping necks and then exploding guys into little jibs like Doom and Quake. And I'm like, which one was it? I think I realized this morning, I'm pretty sure, not 100%, it was definitely either Rambo 2 or 3, because he was killing Russians, which he does in both those films. And he was just like exploding guys unnecessarily into tiny little bits no bigger than your thumb. And that's my first ever Rambo experience. And I probably saw 30 seconds of a film where I'm 9 or 10 years old, and I probably shouldn't have seen it. But it was the network TV version, so there was just like going and sneaking around trees, and he's covered in mud, and that was my first ever experience. But we're going right back to First Blood. Do you have any memories of what thing you first ever saw, or the various? I mean, they're up to 5 Rambo films now.
Quite similar to you, actually. I'm 99% sure it was Rambo 2, First Blood Part 2 that I actually watched because it was him killing Russians in the jungle, and
Yeah, and that becomes like your
it just
memory.
caught my eye.
The thing, the muscles and the close-ups, like Sam Raimi style of all the big muscles and the guns and all that.
I think as well there was like a general awareness because I do remember the Rambo 3 Sega game and him just being on the
Yes,
cover with his like red
and the bow and
band.
arrow. Like,
Yeah. So I kind of knew I was like aware of this persona of Rambo before I actually even sat down and kind of properly watched
yeah, like
the movies.
Reaganomics, Rambo
Yeah.
Commando.
I may have actually even just kept mistakenly calling him Rocky because I only knew Sly Stallone as Rocky. So anytime I saw him in everything,
Yeah.
I'd be like, "Oh, look, there's Rocky. Oh, look, Rocky's in this movie."
Hey, you want to do a fight, you know?
This is it's kind of one of those movies where what people think about Rambo now, when you say the word Rambo, they do tend to think about the big explosive sequels and, one-man army coming in with a big, heavy machine gun and just laying waste
Yeah,
to the enemy.
it's like America,
Whereas
fuck yeah.
the first movie, though, it's a bit different, and it's a bit like, don't get me wrong, surface level, it's just another great action movie, but there is also like a deeper undertone to it that kind of talks to, America's involvement in Vietnam and how those soldiers were treated when they came back from Vietnam. And,
Well, I
there's
think it's a good companion piece to the Deer Hunter as far as being
yes,
an anti-war rather than pro-war film, and it's dealing with the inner emotional reality and post-traumatic stress disorder, as well as, I mean, other people get brain injuries also, in the modern day. But it's dealing with the reality and readjustment to post-war society, where basically you've got someone who's this highly trained killing machine who can't fit back into normal reality again. He doesn't fit in, even if he wants to or tries to. It just doesn't work. And it's a very real reality that differs in levels. Like, I mean, he's still got the use of his body. A lot of people come back missing limbs, missing legs, paralyzed, brain damage from Vietnam and whatnot, and, really messed up life. And, to me, it's almost like a kind of, not connected, but like thematically connected. You can trace lines from like Deer Hunter, First Blood, Platoon. Like, to me, they all kind of go together as like thematically.
and it's also a good look at, this whole, and I'm not sure how prevalent it is these days. Maybe it's even more prevalent than what's showcased in this movie. But, the idea of the small town corrupt cops that essentially just, can make somebody's life miserable because it's, people on a power
Brian
trip.
Dennehy is the ultimate bastard. He's just the best
100%.
at that character.
It's almost like an anti-law enforcement movie in some ways, because it just gets you so angry.
It's funny because there's almost now, if you watch, I mean, I rewatched First Blood this morning. Actually, I watched Rambo 1, 2, and 3 back to back this morning because I got the box set, and I was they've already been sitting out there for months, Rocky and Rambo, and I'm like, I'm going to watch them anyway. So I watched 3 in a row. It's almost a sub-genre now. I can go from First Blood all the way up to Reacher Season 3, which is now on Amazon or wherever the fuck it is. I watched a couple of weeks back. Same kind of Brian Dennehy archetype, the small town sheriff who's in the South and a corrupt asshole, most likely racist, bit of a good old boy. And as bad as he is, his best friend's even worse. But guess what? Rambo accidentally threw a rock at the helicopter, and then he died in the first act. But now the sheriff's really pissed off because that's his lifelong friend. So it's like a whole subgenre of like racist Southern assholes in movies.
Well, as Rambo himself says at the beginning of the movie, why are you pushing me? And that's all they from the very get-go.
Why are you pushing me?
Because, look, he was minding his own business. He had been going to visit a former comrade in arms at his home outside of this small town.
The opening where he goes to see like a guy who was buddies with a Nam, and it was I forget the name of the guy, but it was a black guy from Black Family. So they're already living on the outskirts. They weren't in the southern hick town. They were on the outskirts of the town, and Rambo was walking to him on foot. And he goes to see him, and he's like, "Oh, he's my friend." And like we don't know 100% whether it's his sister or his wife. We don't really know exactly who the character is. Just that the female lady's hanging out the washing. She looked after him for the last year of his life. He had cancer. He died, and she was the one that's basically burying him, taking care of him when he's sick and dying. Whatever relationship is, I presume she's the wife, but they don't really tell us exactly the nature of it. And he's going there, and you realize that's like so grim and horrible. Like they've come back, and they do mention the like bloody with the chemical warfare and all that same thing old Jesse Ventura talks about that possibly mucked his brain up. That gave this guy cancer, and then after that scene, which is so just traumatic and horrible, he's like walked all this distance to see this guy. Then it's like when he encounters Colonel Troutman, he's like, "Oh, that was the last guy of our group. They're all dead. It's just me now. It's like, oh, it's so fucking grim. And that's the opening of the movie.
Yeah, and it really does like set the tone and
Yeah.
the kind of vibe of what we're going to see. Because, like, John Rambo, he is a good man, and he served
Yeah.
his country, and he did his duty diligently. And this is ultimately a story of a man who's returned from war, and like you mentioned at the beginning, he is kind of failing and flailing when it comes to fitting back into society. He's a real outsider, and that kind of outsider, position is
Yeah,
intensified
like
when
Born
he's
on the 4th of
actually,
July and Oliver Stone and all that.
yeah,
It's very much those sort of characters showing the reality of trying to fit back into post-Vietnam America, where people are protesting and throwing rocks and spitting on you when you come back. And he has that line, which is kind of jumping the gun, but he has that emotional scene right at the end. He's like, whether it's from the first or the second, I mix it up because he does emotional speeches in both, where he's going, I love this country. I want people to love me like I love this country. And it's like so human and so real. And Stallone is just brilliant at doing that. Like, and as in being like a genuine actor, whether it's Rocky or Rambo, that moment where it's like, here's this hero and he's all tough and he's built up, but he's like at his most vulnerable, sitting on the floor, pretty much crying and going, what the hell happened?
yeah, and because it's such an emotional moment because he's sitting there at the end of the movie, he's crying, he's wailing, he's talking about how his friends got their like limbs blown off in
Yeah, it got
Vietnam and how his friend
exploded
had
all
like
over him. He's trying to stuff
yeah.
his guts back into him. It's like, oh, Jesus.
And then when he returns home, he's being called like a baby killer and all these horrible names. And like I said, people are like spitting at him, and there's all these like anti-war protests going on. But the worst thing is this, you can't really win when you're Rambo
No.
because you've got the civilians treating you like absolute shit. But then you also have a situation where the government officials, the authorities are also treating you like absolute
Yeah.
dirt because Danahy's whole attitude, like when he even picks him up in the car, he's like, well, you're walking around here with that flag on your jacket, you're going to rub some people the wrong way, and
Yeah.
we don't
And do
really.
you know I love the iconography is Brian Dennis. Also actually, and you can't quite see it in these images. I try to squish him in, but he also actually has the flag on his on his uniform.
Yeah, exactly. But like it's just a real kind of there's no appreciation for this man, what he's done, and
Yeah.
at the moment they only look at him as like essentially a vagrant and a bum. And Brian Dennehy, like the sheriff, he essentially just puts it to him. It's like, look, don't want people like you in my town. Rambo asks him, is there any place I can eat around here? And he's like, yeah, there's
Yeah.
some place you can eat. It's 30 miles outside of town, so you
Yeah.
just keep walking that way.
It's just like Brian Dennehy is like, I'm the sheriff. I do what I do. I keep everything exactly the same, like status quo, like some kind of 1950s town that never left the previous couple of decades. Anything that changes or different, well, I'll beat him up and kick him out of town or put him in prison. That's pretty much what he does.
And it's such a, one of these like self-fulfilling prophecies in a way as well, because, you pick up this man who's somewhat vulnerable and could need help. And, as a police officer, you have the opportunity there to actually do something. So like
That should be a
he kind of
service
puts,
rather than a prick.
protect and serve. And, he puts Rambo down. He's like, oh, you need to get a haircut and, you smell bad and stuff. And it's kind of like, well, if you were really doing your job, then you'd bring him someplace to get some food, and then you'd
Yeah.
bring him someplace or show him where he could get a haircut and someplace to stay. You'd help this man, but instead
Yeah.
you're
You
just
take
trying
him to
to
the
like
pub and
brush
have
him
a
under the
fucking drink
rug.
with him or something, like what
Yeah,
he's clearly not got fuck all else to do, but he's picking them up and driving them out of town.
yeah, and it's such a small town, small minded, bad
Yeah.
attitude
It's a real
that Dennehy
stereotype, but
has.
Brian Dennehy is just like absolutely brilliant at being that character. And he's done it so many times in so many other films, but I love that they make him such a prick and so believable, and yet he's also human. And I don't know if you quite call him sympathetic. There's a couple of times in the film where he's like, oh, I should apologize or I went too far. But there's moments, but they keep him human. They keep him a believable human, but he's still a piece of shit.
Yes, yeah. And ultimately, if he had just handled things differently at the very beginning
Yes,
of the movie, it never would have escalated to the level that it did.
yeah, he lets his
And as you
ego
did,
get the better of him.
oh, completely, completely. Because look, he's as Rambo describes him, he's the king shit cop. And he's clearly someone who's like always had his way and has always been
Yeah,
like the ultimate boss man. The buck stops with him. And now he's like asserting his authority over this man who really just was looking for a little bit of help and maybe
yeah.
a bit of food and some
Well,
place to stay.
it's like Dennehy's even a prick to the colonel, and even when the National Guard comes in, he's like, "Well, this is my town." It's like, no, things have gone too far. It doesn't matter whose town is it.
Yeah, and look, there's probably an element of characters insecurity there as well, because it's like,
Yeah, yeah,
you thought you were probably above these military men, and not only has one of them now completely decimated your town and like wrecked your police force, now you also have to go to the military for help, which makes you even more humble and
yeah.
ashamed that you've caused this problem.
Yeah, I do love the sort of strangeness and dichotomy of like the small town sheriff versus the big US military in the country and National Guard versus the returning Vietnam vets and all that. They're all very like should be serving America, and in a sense they are. And but I like that it's a movie that shows all these adversaries and different lots coming together and people working together against each other. But it's not an anti-American film, but neither is it a. It doesn't come across as like a jingoistic pro-America film. It's sort of kind of neutral in a sense, but showing just that loggerheads, all these different parties and groups coming together over this event of the, soldier who becomes like the archetypal soldier of like who's just shit on and spit upon by America when he comes back from doing his service.
And really, as we mentioned just a moment ago, beginning of the movie, then he picks up Rambo and he essentially drives him to the other side of the town and tells him to get lost. And it's really just the crucial moment, I suppose, when everything really begins to kick off is when Rambo just pretty much decides, like, fuck this, I'm not going to walk to the next town. I'm going to turn back around and I'm just going to walk right back the way I came. I don't care what this cop is telling me to do. And this is what really enrages Dennehy's character. It's the
Yeah,
fact that he had the absolute cheek to push back against what he told him to do. He just can't accept this. So
it's
he
like my will, my
immediately
town.
he arrests Rambo for vagrancy, I believe, is what the actual charge
Yeah,
is. He's
vagrancy.
bringing him in on. And once again, this is another moment where the police had an opportunity to do something right. So fair enough, yes, he did disobey the sheriff, and you've brought him in. But then they just take it to an extra level where they start making fun of him. They're treating him really poorly.
Yeah,
Then his best mate, who's like a deputy, he's like, "Oh, what's your name, soldier?" And I'll get you to talk. And really like bullying him, and really just treating him very poorly. And it's actually that guy, the guy. He's like Horatio from CSI Miami, the little red-haired cop. He's the only cop who seems to be
by
kind of
David
like,
Caruso.
yes, yeah. It's like, should we really be treating this guy so badly? Like, I'm looking
Yeah,
at his
he's the
file
one guy
here and it
treated like a
says,
person. Like, what we're going too far.
yeah, and he actually goes and looks up, John Rambo's background. He's like, holy shit, like this guy is like a recipient of the Medal of Honor and, a decorated, combat veteran. But the rest of the cops do not give a shit about that.
Yeah,
They
these
treat him
like
like absolute
lazy,
shit.
coffee swilling, donut eating, fat belly cops who are like out hunting on weekends and beating people up of various races in their spare time. They're like, oh, we don't care about this war hero. Like, we think we're great.
And the police brutality alone that you get to see would be enough to kind of justify
Like
the
hosing
character
them
to
down
do
with
what
that
he
big
does.
hose, that's just like another torture. And the way they play the flashback scenes where he's flashing back to being tortured by like Viet Cong and all that. And it's like that's just like so well done.
Well, yeah, like they hose him down with a fire hose, which is incredibly cruel. And then they actually what really kicks things off and which causes Rambo to
Tries to
escape
shave
and
him.
flee. they try to shave him, but they try to shave him with a baton pressed up against his neck, choking
Yeah,
him while he's being restrained. While someone doesn't take like, a normal, like they actually take like a proper like blade razor, like an extendable blade razor, and they're holding it to his face and his
yeah. Like
throat.
he flashes back to an actual big like Bowie sort of knife from a Viet Cong guy in the film, and that's the final thing that kicks him off, where he starts like beating the hell out of them.
And boy, does he beat the hell out of them. Like there's dudes being thrown through windows. They're like getting just completely manhandled. And he easily makes his escape out of the building, and he quickly commandeers a dirt bike that's being driven by some,
Yeah,
random bystander.
it's a very Batman Arkham Asylum sort of scene. It's like this guy's a badass, but he's like complying with their wishes. They've arrested them. There's doing this. There's doing that. And now they're like borderline torturing him, doing horrible shit to him. And he's like, okay, enough's enough. I'm going to fuck these guys up.
Just to emphasize how, unprofessional, especially that the deputy is, when Rambo makes his escape down the street on the dirt bike, that deputy immediately goes to start firing his rifle after
Yeah, so
Rambo, even
shooting at
though
him.
it's a street filled with, civilians and innocent people. Brian Dennehy actually has to stop him from,
Yeah, he's like, there's
taking the
people down
shot.
there.
And I think in a lot of ways, that deputy character, he's nearly, even though Brian Dennehy was what started everything off, it's that deputy that takes things to an extra level
Yeah,
because,
he's like the Brian Dennehy character on steroids. He's like
yeah,
the guy that's meant to be best friends with him, but he's like everything bad about Brian Dennehy is magnified in that friend, and everything good about like anyone else or David Caruso. There's a little bit of that in the Brian Dennehy, but in that friend, he's just like the ultimate like worst racist, doesn't give a fuck, even threatens to kill his fellow officers and the helicopter pilot
yes,
when they don't comply with him. He's just the ultimate piece of shit.
yeah, and it's really satisfying. It's kind of both, it's both satisfying but also a bit discombobulating when his character does die, because you're kind of glad he's dead because of what a bastard he was.
Yeah,
But at the same time, you feel bad now for Rambo because you know he's going to be blamed for the
yeah,
death
he's
of a
going to get
police
blamed for the
officer.
death when the guy's shooting at him with a rifle from a helicopter that's hovering in that like kind of gorge in the canyon or whatever. And the helicopter pilot's like, "We got to get out of here. There's updraft, low draft, whatever the hell it is. This can't stay straight." The guy's shooting at him, and Rambo's trying to hide behind a tree and dodge these shots, but then he throws that rock. Just throws a rock and it cracks the window, which is not going to hurt anyone. It's like, leave me alone, go away. And then the bloody the deputy guy leans too far and falls out of the helicopter and gets himself killed by falling onto the rocks by the river and waterfall. But then the guys up above, all the bloody good old boys looking down, think, "Oh, Rambo has done that," and not they don't know that the guy's fallen out by himself and he's a fucking idiot who went too far, who wasn't supposed to be firing in the first place.
Exactly. And like you mentioned as well, he also was encouraging the pilot to do something dangerous, which the pilot
Yeah,
advised him was
and the
not
pilot's like,
safe
"No, there's a
to
big
be doing.
storm coming." And there's a good in that scene when Brian Denner he drives him out of town and he turns around and goes back and John Rambo starts walking back. That's the first drips of rain actually come down on his head, which is really good because it's a prelude to the storm that's about to come, both emotionally for him and the actual storm that's rolling in that someone mentions later on, going, "Oh, you picked a bad day for this. There's a big storm coming into the mountain."
And I'm sure you might know for definite, but like I'm pretty so this guy, he's the first, I suppose, fatality casualty of the movie. And like we said, like his death, Rambo wasn't really directly responsible for what happened to him, even though
No, he
he's going to
wasn't.
get the blame. Am I correct in saying that that deputy is actually the only person who kind of dies by Rambo's hand? Like I know Rambo takes out a lot of people, but
Yeah, pretty much. Because all the other guys, he sets up once they start tracking him in the mountains. He takes off and he goes into full Vietnam mode. He like finds an old bit of like canvas or tarp, whatever it is, and cuts it up with his knife, makes it into clothing because he has no shirt if they took it off him. He starts making like little kind of like bamboo style traps that are like whittling bits of wood, makes traps and the stuff, and then he hides in the old mine. And they all, as I was rewatching it again this morning, they all walk into these traps and basically hurt themselves. If they hadn't walked into themselves and tracked them, they wouldn't have got hurt. He wasn't actively trying to kill them. He was trying to stay away from them.
Yeah, and a lot of people get pretty badly injured and maimed. But once again, if they hadn't been tracking him and following him to begin with. Okay, I will make, because a memory is after hitting me there. He does kill a couple of dogs, which we don't like on this show.
Off screen,
but
I don't like seeing violent animals, but it was off screen, so it's just a sound effect going like that.
Yeah, you hear the whimper. You hear the whimper, you know. And look, it was self-defense. He didn't want his throat to be ripped
stunt
out.
Dogs were not hurt. So I'm happy about that.
But yeah, largely apart from injuring and maiming, like Rambo isn't like a cold-blooded killer of civilians. You know, it's he's a man who's on the run. And
he's strategic. He's meant to be like, he goes into the mode, his post-traumatic stress plus his conditioning and training are strategically knocking out points of power and electric power as opposed to whatever other type of power. You know, when he goes nuts in the town and they think he's dead, he doesn't kill the soldier. He commandeers the army truck and doesn't kill the soldier. He just pushes him out the door and says, "Go home." Tells him to get out of there from the National Guard. Blows up a bunch of buildings after he knocks the power out, and he goes after Brian Dennehy pretty much with the intention to kill him.
Yeah, and there's a real contrast in, like, you know, the level of skill that Rambo has compared to like the local National Guard soldiers that actually show up, because like he runs, like he runs rings around them, and like they're all kind of like, totally
you go up there in the scene with the mine, and they've got like a fucking grenade launcher or whatever. It's like, you go up there, it's like, no, you go up there. I'm not getting killed for this. It's just the weekend thing.
And of course, though, Rambo, you know, once again, though, when he fires warning shots. He doesn't shoot to kill. You know, he is just trying to escape without, you know, causing any death or unnecessary death. Though I think it's pretty obvious that if he did get Brian Dennehy one-on-one without the intervention of the Colonel, he probably would just kill him pretty quickly.
There's some really great lines in the film that are like, they're almost like showboating, but they really are kind of key scenes in dialogue with Colonel Troutman, where it's like when he talks to the local hick police and is like, I'm surprised he let interview guys live. He doesn't normally do that. And the Brian Dennehy's like, oh yeah, whatever. And then the same thing with the National Guard is like, it's like, you know, he doesn't normally he just kills people. That's what he's trying to do. He's really restraining himself by not killing you.
It's like, what you call hell, he calls home. Isn't that one of the great Troutman lines?
The second film as well.
And Troutman, he is an excellent character and an excellent way to. He's so good at conveying just how dangerous Rambo can be if he's pushed. Yes. And really just tries to warn Brian Dennehy's character, like, look, you really don't know what you're getting into. You've already taken it too far. Just let me talk to him. I can de-escalate him. I can get him to come in. He'll get tired in a few days. He'll probably turn himself in if you back off. But then he just will not listen. You'll pick him up with a car wash in another state. Yeah, that's exactly pretty much what he says. And they should have listened to him. They really should have listened to him. Because the actual damage done to this wee town as a result of this day, like, he does an awful lot of damage.
M60s and fuel from that army truck after the National Guard's leaving, thinking he's dead. They fired the explosive into the mine and think he's dead. They're all leaving, going, "Oh, it's all over now." Then they hear over the radio, "Oh, that Rambo guy is still out there, by the way." And then before you know it, he's like knocked out the power lines in several sections of the town, basically in a big circle around the police station. And Brian Dennehy, at least he has some sense of self-preservation. He goes up to the roof because he's like, well, her office is full of all these windows, or Rambo could just shoot him from across the street. He goes up to the roof and he's sitting up there like, oh, I better take this seriously. And you can tell he's like, no, you're an old, fat, out of shape guy who's in panic mode, and this fucking warrior has come to massacre you.
Yeah, this like special pillar of the government you've now
Yeah,
enraged, and you've had so many opportunities up until now
to
to back off.
de-escalate. Yeah,
Yeah, but you
and
just kept
and
pushing it.
yeah, and another one of the Colonel Troutman things is like when he's like, "You guys couldn't handle him," when he was just like up on the hill by himself. What makes you think you can fight against him now that he's got like weapons that he's from the National Guard? And that kind of shows the hubris of Brian Dennehy's character that moment. That like, and like as a viewer watching it, going, "Oh shit, he's right. He just stole a whole truck worth of fucking weapons, and before he just had a knife and nothing else, and he took out half the town's police. And like now, he's like going to full warfare mode on the town."
Yeah, so much so that I believe they have to like do like a public service announcement where they're like
Yeah, he gets on
calling
the
an
radio.
emergency
Yeah.
curfew. And but yeah, just
People
the
are all
amount of
casual about it though.
chaos.
They're like, "Oh yeah, it's that guy again. Do we even bother listening to him?"
It was definitely a movie that I think this movie along with T2, I always wanted a dirt bike as a kid because of watching these
Yeah,
two
the dirt
movies.
bike.
Because he definitely
Yeah,
uses it to great effect to escape the cops. He can go off
yeah,
road and
that's a good
avoid them.
scene. Like Brian Henry chasing after him in the old Blues Brothers style car that is going to crash into something or run into something too far uphill, and he takes off on the dirt bike and eventually he's on foot, and he's obviously in better condition than Brian Dennehy because he's walking on foot at the start of the movie, and he's doing that like Forrest Gump kind of walking where he's probably walked across an entire state before he's even got to this town. He doesn't own the car. And so he's going to like walk uphill, no problem. Whereas the local police and all that, they're all like out of breath and huffing and puffing, trying to chug uphill, going, "Oh, we were out here last season hunting deer, weren't we? Oh yeah." Not taking any of it seriously.
You do kind of feel a little bit bad for the young red-haired cop because he was kind of as nicer than the other cops basically to
It
Rambo,
was
but
a
I'm pretty
decent,
sure
normal person.
he still gets impaled pretty badly by some like
Yeah.
spiky trap. His legs get
Do
all
you know
mangled
the
up and stuff.
Do you know the fun trivia about this death scream?
No.
I'm going to mimic it now, and then I'll tell you what it was used for. He goes, "Ah, yeah," like kind of like that, but like deeper. It was used in the first Golden Axe Sega arcade game without permission. Used
Wow.
as an example with him going, "Ah, yeah," when you're beating up all the guys in Golden Axe to make that scream. That's from the David Caruso scream.
I'll never be able to unhear that now that
Yeah,
I know where they
yeah.
stole
No,
it
it was
from.
a Retronauts podcast that like talked about that on their Golden Axe specials. I mean, other sources have talked about it, but like that long running podcast is awesome. It's like 700 episodes or something.
We're jumping all around here, but that's what we do. But
Yeah.
the we kind of mentioned earlier Rambo speaks at the end of the film about he'd watched his friends get blown up in front of him and their guts going everywhere, and about him being like the last remaining survivor of his team. And I'm sure you've heard the story, and it might even actually be on the DVD and Blu-ray special features, but there was an alternate ending for the movie, which I'm sure you're aware of, where Troutman actually kills Rambo in the police station. It's kind of like almost like a mercy killing, just to put an
Did
end to
they
what's
film
going
it
on.
or just talk about it?
It is filmed. I believe I've actually
Oh,
seen it
I'm
before.
not
It's
sure if I've
on.
seen it because I had
I
some
think
other
it's on the
DVDs that
special
were like
features.
2 disc editions, and then I've got like one that's got like movies 1 through 4, and it says special edition, and it'll say disc 1, sort of a 2, but the second disc isn't in there, so it doesn't have the features.
Well, I'll put it out there to anybody watching or listening now. Am I just having like a Mandela effect type of weird false memory, or did I
Oh, there's
actually
definitely
see that?
special features for the movies and that. I just don't have them on those budget sets I've got. If I replace them with the Blu-ray sets, if it's got them on the Blu-ray sets, I might get it because the picture quality is really good on the DVD.
I wonder. Well, I don't wonder. It's an easy kind of answer, I suppose. But like, if he'd been killed off at the end of the movie, there would be no Rambo franchise. That's kind of
Yeah, there wouldn't be.
would it be? It also would have
Do
been a
we, do we need a
major.
quick Do we need a quick Metal Gear sidebar for Colonel Troutman?
But there is like a. I suppose like there's not to say that everything he did in the film was inconsequential, but I suppose at the end, because there was only really one real death, there was a lot of damage caused, and he himself didn't die. So I suppose at the end, the version that we got, everything I suppose kind of like resolves itself in as happy an ending as you could get. Whereas I think if they'd done the ending where Troutman actually killed Rambo, that would have just ended the movie on such a depressing downer, especially after him giving this like long kind of monologue about how his friends have died and all the kind of hardships he's gone through. For Troutman just to turn around and kill him after all that would be a pretty depressing way to end everything. So I am glad, apart from the fact that I do enjoy Rambo 2, 3, and 4. I am glad they went the route that they did.
Yeah, it would definitely be a crappy ending if they just killed him. But like, it also kind of explains the dialogue scene where briefly Troutman sits down with Brian Dennehy, and it's like in a like bar or whatever, like a bar restaurant, and it's like Brian Dennehy's like, "What would you actually do if he came in?" And it's like, "Would you kill him or would you give him a hug and a kiss or whatever?" It's like very sarcastic. It's like having that weird line, and then he's like, "I don't know. I'd have to see him first." It's very real. It's like, I don't know how far he's gone. He might be okay, or it might be just like you've really pissed him off.
Yeah, he could even kill me before I even see him. You
yeah,
know,
yeah.
we don't know how
So
far
it's a very, very
he's
good
gone.
line.
But it really, Rambo doesn't need to actually kill anybody to demonstrate just how effective he is as a survivalist and a combat vet, because as we've already mentioned, he's able to DIY himself a lot of traps and just defensive situation. Like he's so good at like getting the lay of the land and just digging in while
Yeah,
everybody else is kind of flailing about trying to find him, and
it's
he
all the stuff
asserts
you
his
see
dominance.
in, like, if you watch Tour of Duty, the things that the Viet Cong do, where they've got the tunnels, the traps, are hiding in plain sight. He's obviously learned those tactics from the people he was fighting.
Exactly. And out in the woods, out in the wilderness, he's the king. He's the one you don't fuck with because he's the one who's in
Yeah,
charge out here.
he's like gone home. Once he goes from being the vagrant to wandering, being arrested, taken off on the dirt bike, he's up in the hills. Once he starts setting the traps, he's like emotionally, mentally, he's like back in Vietnam.
Yeah, he's in the zone. He's got
Yeah,
the 1,000 yard stare, and
like
he's
where the world makes the most sense.
yeah, and he's ready to do whatever it takes to get out of this situation. But like once again, it all always comes back to very poor behavior and decision making by the police and how they treated him
Yeah,
initially, and like
I like the way they make it believable too. They don't come across as over the top. They come across as like, well, we're old and we're kind of lazy. We run this town, and we're just asshole cops that you've seen in so many TV shows and whatnot. But they don't make it unbelievable. It's like, yeah, there are asshole cops out there, but you also know there's good cops and decent people out there. But maybe these guys are the 10 or 20% that are just pieces of shit.
maybe there's a little bit of an element of like there is almost this theme of how inadequate these cops are when it comes to facing a
Yeah,
threat like Rambo. And then you wonder sometimes if the resentment that they show him for being a combat veteran is like maybe their own insecurity coming through, that they're
I
not
think so.
actually.
I think they play that up because they're
Yeah,
old, they're unfit. They've got the guy that dies, the guy that's befriended by Brian Dennehy that falls out of the helicopter is shooting at him. They show him in a scene where, like in a movie, where you usually see headshots and mid shots. They show a full body shot where he's got this big beer gut hanging out, and you're just like, oh, you fat piece of shit.
yeah. And a lot of the cops are kind of like that. Even Dennehy himself
Yeah.
has a bit of a belly on him.
Well, he's the larger
And
man, whereas the other guy's kind of
yeah,
thinner, but he has this big paunch that they pause on and show you. It's almost intentional to show you, like, he's old, he's racist, he's out of shape. We're just giving you all these reasons to hate him because he's going to fucking die.
and he's just jealous of poor old John Rambo because he's
Yeah.
actually, a physical specimen who can actually do
He's
something.
actually underweight in this film. If you read like Stallone's books and training logs and that, I got a book for years ago. He talked about stuff he did where he went like did all sorts of conditioning and all that. But he's in that sort of UFC light middleweight shape where he's actually all his abs are sticking out, but he's actually underweight as far as being human and healthy and all that. But just to get all the muscles sticking out, whereas body fat's like probably dangerously low that he would have to gain back again after the film.
I suppose it's kind of somewhat accurate though as well, because he's been living the outdoor life of wandering. Yeah,
he's come out of Vietnam where you're not going to be getting a whole lot of good meals.
Exactly, and man, he's shredded. He has cut the shit.
Yeah, he's super shredded. Like he really worked on that.
Seriously. But I love that. Well. I love when they kind of they disrobe him the first time when he's in the cop station, and you actually see the battle scars all over his back and his chest.
And the cop's like, oh, holy hell, what's all this? And he turns around, it's like even worse. It's got like knife scars and burn marks on him.
This guy's seen some serious shit, I believe, might be his line. You know, when he sees it.
And it's like they're trying to like mess with him and get into his head, and they're kind of doing like lightweight torture with the hose and other shit. And then there's all these marks and stuff on him. It's like clearly someone did that to him, because you can't reach into that angle on yourself like a self-cutting or whatever. So then you know it's like, okay, this guy's seen some real shit. It's like
such a badass, like, and he takes, like I said earlier, it's not until we get to the razor shaving that it really breaks him. Like he takes everything they're dishing out right up until that moment, which causes the big PTSD flashback. So he's conditioned that he's able to absorb a lot of pain and punishment before he actually even goes off the edge.
It's like a mental dissociation. I mean, there's a certain, you know, if you look at like professional fighters and weightlifters and like strongmen and shit, they've done a certain amount of like stuff where you're basically torturing yourself to get into that condition in the first place. So like you've got a certain mental toughness, but then you've got to have beyond the body's tolerance of pain, a kind of mental dissociation with what's happening, to not sort of take it. It's not just about not taking it personally. You've got to kind of like switch off like an Indian yogi. And so the pain is not who you are. The pain is something you're experiencing. But he's like, you know, he's had those experiences through the conditioning of the beret program and then through the negative conditioning of the torture by the Viet Cong.
It's one of those things where I'm almost afraid to say it in case it happens, because especially the way Hollywood is going, they're so devoid of like fresh ideas and things. I wouldn't be surprised at all if they tried to do like a Rambo prequel of like, this is young Rambo in Vietnam, and we're just going to have him.
Well, Rambo 2 almost is like a Rambo prequel. If you just change the year from whatever year it was in the 80s and whatever, like early 80s, if you change it to before Vietnam, it basically is a prequel.
And yeah, I think like Rambo 2 was the first one I watched, and the first one I'd watched properly. So it was always a mystery to me at the beginning of Rambo 2 why he was in prison, because I hadn't seen the first film, so I didn't understand why.
The third one, and number 3, he's in a monastery, which is basically the same scene, but they've changed prison to monastery.
Yeah, and at least I suppose with the monastery hit, he's there somewhat, I think, voluntarily. Isn't he helping like the monks gather money to fix the roof of the monastery or something like that? He's participating.
He's doing the stick fighting, but he's doing stick fighting just to give the money to give it away to the monks.
Yeah.
But if you watch Hot Shots, there's a hot lady that turns up. They're all monks are looking at her. And
there's I know I won't jump the gun too much talking about Rambo 2, because I'm sure we will get to it someday, but I absolutely like.
Sure.
I am in love with the love interest from Rambo 2. You know, his lady that he meets in Vietnam, the kind of contact that he promises to bring back to marry. Like, she is gorgeous. Like, I just absolutely, hubba.
Yeah,
but that's a story for another time. It's
horrible when she just conveniently dies, like in the second going into the third act, and it's like you can see it coming. It's really telegraphed, and it's like Rambo's gonna live, and then she dies, and it's horrible. It's tragic, but it's like, oh man.
get more emotional trauma for poor Rambo.
Yeah,
You know,
well, the
hasn't he
one
been
character
through
who's
enough?
sympathetic to him in the film conveniently dies 2/3 of the way into it.
But yeah, look, like I said, we will definitely get into hopefully Rambo 2 and
Yeah.
3 and possibly 4, which I actually do like. I haven't actually seen 5 yet. I haven't gone that
You
far.
haven't seen it? Well, either you
No.
enjoy it or it'll really piss you off. Like, I've watched it twice, and I can say it's kind of not a Rambo film. And a lot of people really didn't like it. Some people say all sorts of weird things about it that I won't even repeat them here because some of it's offensive what people say about the film. I can't even give a good context. If you watch it and if you watch it as a film that's a Stallone action film, you can enjoy it. As a Rambo film, it's not a good Rambo film. It's the closest in cinematic terms we've ever seen to a Punisher decent film, like as in Marvel Comics, the Punisher. It's more like that, but it happens to be Stallone, like the stuff that happens in it.
I'll tell you, I'll be perfectly upfront with you as to the reason why I haven't
If you
watched it
thought
yet.
number
And
4 was quite violent and explodey and giblets flying everywhere, number 5 is like up to 11.
well, here's the thing. I actually really, really enjoyed number 4. Like, really
Well,
enjoyed
number
it.
4 was a
Like,
good story. It was a good story, and it was
yeah,
more going back to the first one, where it was trying to be
exactly.
more a bit more real as far as like showing not doing the 80s thing of like, well, it's we're America, fuck yeah, come and save the day, and either we're killing and fighting the Russians who are evil and awful and terrible, but also there's good people in Russia, and well, we're fighting the Arabs who are evil, awful and terrible like True Lies, but also there's good people in various parts of the Arab nations. It was trying to show like Vietnam and the multiple races of people live there, showing them as human beings, not as cartoonish, over the top villains and cartoon characters like GI Joe and Rambo 2 and all that.
I think the reason I like Rambo so much, as in the 2008 fourth film, like you mentioned about returning to the roots of the
It was
first
Julie
film.
Benz. You
For
were just hot
me,
for her.
well, that as well. But like to me, it feels like it the story comes full circle, which is why I never felt the need to go to number 5, because at the end of number
Well,
4 we
the
see
story
him
in number 5 is shit. It doesn't connect to the other films at all.
yeah. See, that's the thing, because at the end of number 4 we see him finally walk down the driveway of his father's house, so he's finally returned
Yeah,
home. And to me, that was like a perfect ending for the character. Like, we've seen him go through all of this shit, and now finally he's come home and he's going back to his family, who are hopefully still, he still has some living relative. So when
yeah.
I kind of found out they were making a fifth one, I just was having the no rush to see it for
It's
that
like the
very
Terminator
reason.
sequel.
Yeah, exactly. The story has been told. Like, the story is over as far as I'm concerned,
Yeah, the
and
story
it
is
just feels like
nonsense, but
extra.
it's still an enjoyable action. It's an enjoyable action Stallone film, but it's a bad Rambo film.
Yeah, and look, I will watch it someday. Like, it will be watched, but I just thought I'd mention my reasons for not having watched it up until now, because I
It's like
was
watching the
satisfied.
Expendables. They've done 4 of those, but like, are any of them actually good? Not really, but it's
Yeah,
Stallone, so you watch it.
yeah. I do still enjoy the first one. It's the closest to being like a genuinely good film, I feel like,
Yeah,
with the Expendables. And I also think Steve Austin is an excellent villain, tough
yeah, he's
guy in the
awesome,
movie.
and it's kind of heartbreaking seeing like Stallone. He beats himself up for these movies. Like number 3, on the scene with the camels and the goat. He's actually on the fucking camel, and he really injured himself in
Yeah,
that scene. And during the Expendables, he like had to undergo multiple fucking surgeries after those films. He just kept beating himself up because he's just a fucking hardcore dude when he makes the films. He's like his own stuntman in as many scenes as he can do, even when no one asks him to, because half the time he's directing and writing it. So like, well, I'm going to be the stuntman too.
I'm kind of surprised, and once again, I know we're going ahead a bit here, but I am kind of surprised that in subsequent re-releases and kind of new editions of Rambo 3, that they've still always kept in that message at the end of the movie where it's like, oh, this movie is dedicated to the brave men and women of the Mujahideen.
Who, by the way, becoming the Taliban later on, that America's fighting against.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Because there's been. I'm sure there's plenty of people who are like, "What do you mean the Mujahideen? What the hell? Blah 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 blah." But like, if you take it in the context of when that film was made and what America's views were at the time, there was nothing wrong there. But what
it's
was said.
one of the things I did like about Rambo 3, where it's in we've got in the Middle East, and then the Russians are the bad guys in this film. They mention like Spetsnaz and all this, and special forces and whatnot. I think Rambo 3, along with Lawrence of Arabia, is one of those few films, like English-speaking films, where we actually show Arab people as human beings rather than as cartoonish villains. So I do like that about it.
Yeah, and you actually get to see them like playing sports and doing, normal real
and
life
being like
human
people
things.
And families, and they're like sympathetic. It's like, we're the rebels standing up against whatever's going on, and whatever happens after the fact's different. But like, any good war film ultimately needs to show, rather than being like, well, it's us versus them and goodies versus baddies, and to show here's two opposing forces. They're all fucking human beings. Like, one of the other rare examples was when Clint Eastwood did Flags of Our Fathers, and did a remake of Iwo Jima. And in that, we got to see an American film that was like, scene about the flag going up, and it was all kind of the stuff around the war and Flags of Our Fathers. And then Iwo Jima, it was all like combat. And you're seeing like family and friends and people on this bloody island, and big American forces coming in, and just like really graphic, really horrible stuff happening, but showing, well, this is what it's like from what we would call the enemy's point of view, if you were America during World War II. And not just being sympathetic, but actually showing that person's point of view. Because every country and every race and every religion and all the people on the world, everyone's got their own point of view and beliefs and whatnot. And they're all valid. They're all equally valid. And they've all got films and stories and poems and whatever from their own point of view. So to deny that is basically a lie when we watch, war films and that.
Yeah, and nobody is immune to the propaganda that's spewed everywhere.
Yeah.
And depending on where you live, when you were born, what the current political climate is in the country you're living in, you could have completely different views to me, to Johnny, to whoever, but you're still a person who has to go and live a life and like live day to day. Even if you do happen to live under possibly a cruel political regime or wherever you happen to be based. But yeah, like you said, like at least in Rambo 3, it actually showcased them as actual people and not, just these, oh, look, it's a guy in a turban with an AK-47, which, it's just the, you can get the typical, the Hollywood terrorist kind of trope or whatever, or like bad guy trope.
Yeah, like True Lies.
Yeah, exactly. Well, I actually watched True Lies last night with the missus. I always have a great time watching True Lies.
That was a good film.
But like, going back to Rambo, like I think what makes the first film very unique is it does kind of straddle that ground between, like I said earlier, on the surface, it's a balls to the wall action movie, and if you're just looking for an adrenaline hit, it will do the job for you on a surface level. But it does have that extra layer of commentary on how veterans are treated, how Vietnam War veterans were treated in particular, and how American society, reacted to these veterans when they returned.
Yeah, it does that so well.
War.
And it's one of the earliest films that did that. I mean, you've got the Deer Hunter, you got First Blood. Later on, of course, we got Oliver Stone stuff, and it does it. I think it does it kind of delicately and real well, where it's not trying to be in your face about it, but like there's little scenes here and there, and then the bit at the end where Troutman goes into the police station after he's blown up half the bloody town, and he's just sitting on the floor, and he does a thing that only Stallone could do. Jean-Claude couldn't do it. Chuck Norris, Schwarzenegger could not do it. Stallone, best actor of any of the 80s action movie guys. He can do all the muscle gun stuff. He can do the real Al Pacino emotional breakdown reality stuff where he just sits on the floor and he crumbles to pieces like, oh man, my God, my buddy, my friend, he blew up in his guts and I was trying to stuff him back in, man, and I couldn't do it. And I'm trying to get a job in a car wash and nobody gives a shit about me. And he just rambles on, and he's like crying, and it's like, if it was done the wrong way, it would be a real mugging for the camera and real not a good scene. But he's so believable, and he's just so, you like, in that moment you just like really feel for him. You're like, he's this ultimate war death killing machine, but he's breaking down and going like, my friends are all fucking dead, and my last friend was trying to stuff his guts back in, and I come back to this town in America and they're trying to fucking torture me and harass me just when I want to walk through and get a meal and probably sleep a night and keep walking if no one bothered me. It's such a great scene, and I think Stallone, being Italian and also an immigrant, really adds to that scene as well. Really, it comes like a real true kind of scene, even though it's in a fiction.
Yeah, because isn't his line something like, in Nam, I was flying gunships, over here they won't even hire
like
me for a
$1 million
car wash. Yeah, and it's such a,
I can't get a job at a car wash. Yeah,
and it's so true, like that type of attitude.
Franchise masses.
And I know you're kind of a little bit like me. I know we're kind of quick to kind of say, oh, like it's a southern hick town. I'm not even sure what state it's set in. It looks like it could even be, like, the town to me almost looks similar to the town in Deer Hunter, which I think Deer Hunter was set in Pennsylvania, but it has that kind of look of, there's probably like a factory or one type of business that keeps the town
it's a real middle
running.
town in America. It's kind of purposely indistinct. Like, could be anywhere.
Yes, yeah. Looks a little bit cold because there is snow on the mountains, but we can't be totally sure. Maybe Jesse, the epic badger, knows where it is. Maybe he's like, oh no, that's in Colorado or wherever. It's probably not. Like, it's probably someplace.
Oh
totally
yeah, there's
different.
definitely, like, we're at a disadvantage. Like, there's people who live in certain states in America and go, oh, that's my backyard, or it was filmed here. Or if I watch The Matrix, I'm like, well, that's fucking Sydney, mate. They just like filmed it over there. But if you've lived in an actual region or know where they film stuff, but they make it kind of indistinct for that, larger audience.
Definitely, I do think that now that we've kind of we've popped our cherry now with the first blood, so we definitely now have to put on the list for future episodes at some point in the future the rest of the Rambo movies, and maybe that will finally be it could be to kick up the arse I actually need just to go ahead and watch that fifth one, just to actually say that I've seen it, because I can't complain about something unless I've seen it. Otherwise I'm just a twat on the internet.
If you like exploding bad guys, there's things to enjoy. But good action, bad Rambo.
Yeah. But speaking of action, because we were action packing it, last week with the Terminator, and of course we had a special bonus episode where we met up with our good friend Jesse, the epic badger, and we were talking about
entered the arena.
We were talking about our video game movie, franchises and crossovers, but we are kind of sticking to this to the action train at the moment. So what's our next action movie coming up on the list?
It's multiple choice. We're either going to go. We can go to. I'll look at the options here. If we go, we'll bring them. Hang on, let's see if I've got them still in there. There we go. Let's look at the options. So we've done one of four. We've covered Rambo First Blood. So the options are: we can go Commando, Schwarzenegger, Bloodsport, Van Damme, or Invasion USA, Chuck Norris. So spin the wheel, DJ, and pick which one.
Oh, that's I'm feeling Arnie-ish. Let's go Commando. We haven't done Commando already, have
Rambo Commando.
Yeah, Commando. We're gonna be like John Matrix, and we're gonna just kick ass and
there's
destroy an entire South American country.
There's multiple films from all these guys in the 80s that are awesome. Like, you could easily list like the top 3 or 5, but like I kind of picked the 4 most iconic 80s films from these guys, and you could easily go Predator or Commando or whatever, Terminator. But for as far as being like big action movie, tough guys, exploding things, Commando, he's a human being. He's not a robot, you know. So that's kind of what distinguishes him from the Terminator. Even if Terminator's a better film, but yeah, I kind of picked like the four most iconic ones of these guys of the 80s that are like universally sort of beloved.
And as I look at that picture of John Matrix, I'm reminded that I somewhere in this house have an unopened naked John Matrix figure with loads of cool weapons and stuff, and I
Nice.
really need to find it. I have no idea. I got it like last year, and then I put it somewhere, and now I forget where I put it because I didn't open it straight away.
I've got the 1/4 one, which is from Predator. But one of the things I love about it, he's just in kind of jungle camo, so it could be Predator or Commando, like, you know.
Exactly, yeah. And no, I have a little factoid about the movie which I will save for next week when we do it. I was almost going to blurt it out, but I'll save it for next week.
As long
So
as
you'll
it's
just
not your
have
fan
to,
theory about Rambo 2, which has John Kreese from Cobra Kai, and also has the guy that's the bad dude in RoboCop, which puts them all in the same universe.
yeah. Look, it's not stretching the bounds of reality too much to suggest such
Well,
things.
the John Kreese guy in the Cobra Kai TV show, they all these flashbacks, was in Vietnam and all that. And if you look at the
Yes.
timeline in Rambo, in 19 whatever the hell year Rambo 2 came out, like mid 80s, the John Kreese character is about 35, which puts, or actually is closer to 40, which puts him in his 20s in the 70s with Rambo. So it's pretty cool because he appears in Rambo 2. So the timeline works out.
Timeline works out, and look, far be it from me to tell anybody what their headcanon should be. It's whatever you want it to be.
Someone's got a theory how to get Commando in there. I'm all for it. Well, I guess you've got two. You've got either Contra or Ikari Warriors. Like that's your Rambo Commando connection.
Yeah, Contra is pretty much like Commando and Rambo teaming up, isn't it? Essentially, it's like two badasses.
And then you add in Metal Gear with that Michael Bean artwork, like expanded universe.
I'd love to go back with a time machine and just get Arnie and Sly when they were still relatively young, maybe even in the early 90s, and be like, look, guys, you're going to do a buddy cop movie together, and it's just going to happen, okay?
Have you watched Prison Break? I rewatched that a couple of weeks ago. I'm sorry, not Prison Break. I have. Sorry, the prison movie that has Stallone and Schwarzenegger in it.
Lock Up. Is it Lock Up or Lockdown?
Yeah.
Yes, it's a great movie.
Lock Up's the one with Stallone. It must be Locked Down. But anyhow, like Stallone's like a prison escaping guy, completely nonsense plot. But it's just an excuse to have Schwarzenegger and Stallone in the film together. But they're both like really old in it and don't do much. But it's still a fun film.
Yeah, well, and don't worry, folks. We will get Bloodsport and Invasion USA eventually. They'll be in the coming weeks. We'll just we'll get the heavy hitters out of the way first.
Well, I bought
Rambo this
back in the end of last year. I picked up like 10 different Stallone movies Van Damme movies on DVD, like ones I didn't have. I'm still missing Bloody Time Cop, but I've got like his other 10 best bloody films I picked up for like $50 on eBay. So we could talk about Bloodsport in particular.
Oh yeah, well I'm a massive Bloodsport fan. I'm a massive fan of the soundtrack as well.
It's a regular the weekends, Bloodsporting it out and beating up neighbors and who knows what else.
Exactly. I'll enter the Kumite and make my country proud.
100-man Kumite.
Kumite.
Yeah, you were Johnny Shades in the original Mortal Kombat, I reckon.
Yeah, but it won't be Frank Dukes we'll be talking about next week. It'll be John Matrix.
As long as it's the true story of Frank Dukes, which is 100% true, not a guy who made up a whole bunch of shit.
Not a guy who made up a whole load of stuff before the internet was a thing, so you couldn't easily research what he was talking about.
The backstory of that stuff. It's real carny sort of shit.
I kind of miss those days of, hearsay stories rather than being able to prove. Yeah.
In search of Spock.
Did you know that Bruce Lee died because he was too strong? That was the schoolyard rumor.
Kung Fu curse from an opposing Kung Fu family. Nothing to do with the actual cerebral edema and like fucking 4 different bloody what do you call it? Cadaver mortician people, coroners that examined her. Fuck the objective science of how overdied.
Don't let science stand in the way of a good story.
Like probably Bruce Lee's was like the most examined corpse since like JFK, but like you got to ignore that and go with all the crazy rumors.
Exactly. Yeah. rumors and hearsay. That's what we're all about.
Yes,
Show fuck scientific
exactly.
evidence.
But yeah, that's a good note to finish up on, I think.
Yeah, that's a good lesson, folks. Just listen to hearsay. Don't listen to experts. Listen to Boba Joe show.
Examine your own corpses. That's my advice. We'll catch you guys next week.
Take care.